let's take a stroll down memory lane today as I rate all the tube amps I've owned. Fenders, Voxes, Hiwatts, Supros, Silvertones, and more. Basically, there's 3 categories. Love it, I can work with it, and I don't miss it. The deciding factors for me are usually size, volume, idle noise, and character of breakup. By the way though, I do think everybody should own a tube amp at some point before you get a modeler that's imitating that, just for data, to know, hey, this is the sound. Like, for me at least, all the guitar tones I like were recorded with tube amps, so that's why I'm a big tube amp guy. The first proper tube amp I got when I was 19 was a 1978 Fender Pro Reverb, which is like a twin but less watts. Still loud as all get out, but it did have that classic Fender reverb, and it did make me fall in love with the sound of 2x12 speakers. On the downside for the Pro Reverb, even though it's less than a twin, it's still just so powerful that you really can't get it to break up unless you're in a studio and it's, in an isolated room somewhere else. So I did have to use overdrive pedals to get it to crunch, but I did use that amp like that was my main amp for many years. Now, even though I love that amp for nostalgia reasons, I'm going to actually rate it as meh, don't miss it. Too loud, too clean. A little bit later, I got a Sound City 100, sometimes called Sound Shitty. I had it modded down to 50 watts and paired with a Carvin 4x12. Gee, I wonder why I have hearing damage and tinnitus now. I'm going to rate that amp as meh, I don't miss it. Sure, it looked cool, but it was just so much. It was just so loud for what I do. Around the same time, my older brother, who's a bass player, left behind his Music Man HD130 when he went to architecture school. So I used that as well, and those are interesting because they have a solid state preamp section, but a 4 6L6 power tube output section. I'm going to rate that one as I don't miss it, too big, too loud. But the other amp that I traded for in this time period that I do miss was a 1966 blackface Bassman and cab. Yeah, it was big and loud, but in a classic way. It just sounded right. I'll give it a rating of I can work with that, because sure, it's still 50 watts, which for most rehearsals and gigs is just more than you'll ever need, but there was something, it was just so classic sounding. It was like, oh, like that one with an overdrive pedal, it was a really good sound. Around this same time, I also traded for the Silvertone 1484 head and cab, which you see in a lot of my YouTube vids. These things are legendary for their crunch, but honestly, I never really liked the tone of it. The cleans, which are important to me on the 1484, are kind of boxy and sort of lo-fi, and not in a very interesting and charming way. And that legendary crunch that everybody talks about, I didn't get it. I don't know, it didn't do it for me. So I'm gonna give the really cool looking, awesome Silvertone 1484 an Eric Haugen rating of, I don't miss it. After I went through the big amp era, I got really into the Telecaster discussion forum. That's a really good forum, by the way. It's very well moderated and people are pretty smart on that forum. And I got curious about Traynor amps, which I do think are some of the best sleeper vintage amps out there. I had a couple of Traynors, one of them a YRM Reverb Master head, which was similar to my 66 Bassman, but obviously had reverb built in. I'm going to give that amp, even though it's 50 watts, which was still kind of more than what I need for most gigs and sessions and things like that, it did sound really good. So I'll give the YRM a rating of, I can work with that. Also around that time, I traded my way to a vintage YGM 3. That thing was good. The right sound, not too big, not too loud. I'm going to give that amp a rating of, I love it, I wish I didn't sell it. Around this time, I also got my first Vox, an AC15, just the stock, I guess they call it the Classic series. For some people, that's the one, but I never really bonded with it. The cleans are kind of boxy, and the legendary Vox chime/crunch doesn't always work for me. There's something kind of pointy and fizzy about the Vox thing that doesn't work for me all the time. So I'm going to give the AC15 a rating of, I don't miss it. Both these amps I miss and I regret selling. You've seen these on YouTube. My 5E3 Tweed Deluxe clone, that one was built by Brian Cox. Really great, like characterful, vocal, woody cleans and great crunch when attenuated. So also around this time, enter the Weber Mini Mass, which I started using a lot to crunch amps up. Now, I love the Weber Mini Mass and I use it all the time. I'm using it today. But it is true, and I've noticed this with, I've used the Power Soak, I've used the SPL reducer and the Weber Mini Mass, all attenuators. Once they're in the circuit and you're running the amp pretty hot, I won't say it's like a blanket over your signal, but there's a veil. There's a veil over there. You definitely round off that top end and kind of compress the low end. So usually you have to adjust that going into the amp, making sure that you got a pretty bright signal before the attenuator does its thing. I still think it's worth it though. The 5E3 is lightweight, portable, sounds good in most varieties, and for a lot of gigs without an attenuator, it's breaking up at exactly the right spot. I only got rid of it because I started getting YouTube Guitar Guy deals on Supros, Hiwatts, and Voxes, and I didn't have enough room for all the amps, and I was like, well, I could always get someone to build me another one at some point. So it's a little bit of a tale of like, Icarus flew too high and got rid of the Tweed Deluxe they probably should have held on to. I love that amp. The other Tweed I had was a Mojotone Tweed Pro clone built by Firebottle Toneworks. Louder, glassier, and cleaner than the 5E3, but still, when overdriven, a really good overdrive. I loved that amp and used it for many, many gigs and YouTube vids, and it never let me down. I'm going to give the Tweed Pro a rating of love it. And now we arrive at the Eric Haugen influencer era where I got deals on amps. So let's go through some of these amps. The Supro 64 Super is actually a surprisingly big sounding amp for such a little box, but maybe too small for some gigs. It should be noted, by the way, that all kind of low wattage single-ended 5-watt amps tend to have transformer hum. Kind of like, it has to do with only having one power tube. When you have two power tubes, the signal can kind of bounce back and forth between them, and for some reason that cancels hum. But single-ended amps like the Supro 65 or the Fender Vibro Champ or the Hiwatt T5 or even the Vox AC4s, where it only has one power tube running, tend to have a, you could call it quiet or loud depending on your ears, a kind of subtle transformer hum to them. However, that can be mitigated with the magical use of the Weber Mini Mass attenuator. For some reason that, I've talked about this in videos, the Mini Mass, once it's in the chain, it grabs that transformer hum. Kind of cool. I'm going to give the Supro 64 Super a rating of, I can work with it. The Supro Amulet is actually a really good sounding 1x10 combo with a pretty usable built-in attenuator and very low operating noise. I'm actually going to give the Amulet a rating of, I love it. That was a useful little amp. Next up we have the Fender 68 Custom Vibro Champ, which is similar to the Supro 65, but obviously with way more features, and digital reverb, which was actually okay. I would say that amp is good for small rehearsals and some gigs depending on the band, so I would actually give the 68 Vibro Champ, let's say I can work with it. The Vox AC4 hand-wired is the Vox that I liked the most, but the cleans weren't Fendery enough for me, and there's no way to wire attenuator to it. I ended up selling mine to Twin House Music, and I think actually Rick Miller of Southern Culture on the Skids has it in his studio now. I'm going to give that amp, let's say I could work with it. The artist relation dude at Hiwatt is a really nice guy, and if I ever get over to England, I want to hang out with Arv and his family. I really like the Hiwatt thing. To me, the cleans are kind of Fendery, but there's something kind of, I don't know, more muscular and like punchy about them. And the breakup is definitely its own thing. To me, it's like what people say of Vox is like, it's kind of like chimey and grindy and full all at the same time. I've owned a couple of the reissue Hiwatts. Here's what I think. I had the High 5, which is their little 5-watt one. That amp took some fiddling to get my sound with. I ended up using the Weber Mini Mass to kind of round off the brightness, and that helped. But yeah, that amp, I'm going to give a rating of, I don't miss it. I do like the T2010. The clean channel is really good on that one. But it did run kind of noisy, like just a little bit of like, a little bit of hiss to it. And I never had the need for the second channel and digital reverb. I tend to not like having extra stuff in an amp that I'm not going to use. You know, the theory being I want, has few resistors, capacitors, wires between me, the guitar, and the speaker. However, with the Minimass Attenuator, that amp sounded really good. So I'm going to give that amp a rating of, I can work with that. The T40 is just the bigger brother of the T20. Same extra features that I don't need. Same little bit of hiss, but again, attenuated, hiss is removed, and it sounded great, but it was more than I needed, so I'm going to give the T40 a ranking of, I don't miss it. Now we're at the current Eric Haugen amp era. The current era is I'm using all locally made, hand-wired boutique amps. Well, kind of, because I can, and someone's got to do it. Someone's got to be the guy who's like, hey, here's the best of the best, and here's what it sounds like. Do I think you need to spend $3,000 on an amp to sound good? Absolutely not. But this is my job, so I get to. Here's what I'm using today. I love the Dusky D2o. It has never let me down. It's a very good sounding amp for a variety of things. Like you can get it to be really fat. You could get it to be really thin. Its crunch is really its own thing, kind of. I don't know how to describe it. It's just always sounded good. The Dusky D2o, love it. By the way, that speaker cab I just got, I'm pretty stoked on this. It's a little 1x10 pine cabinet by a dude called Coffee Cabs. I found him on Etsy. And I loaded it up with a Mojotone Anthem Alnico 10-inch speaker. I'm kind of going through a thing where I'm going back to Alnico and I'm trying to get smaller cabinets that are kind of inefficient, again, so I can get that crunch at as low a volume as possible. Let's talk about my neighbor Steve Carr. I love Carr amps also. I have a Carr Skylark Special. That amp, that's a love it amp. That's a really good amp. In fact, I sold my Bell Ray to buy the Skylark Special. I loved the Bell Ray, the Hiwatt setting on the Bell Ray the most. The other settings I didn't use as much. So when I found out the Skylark had that circuit kind of inside it, I was like, oh, and it has reverb? Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. So the Carr Skylark Special, love it. I mean, really any Carr amp, love it. The other locally made boutique amp that I have is my Mojotone 6G3 Brown Deluxe Kit. I'm going to give that one, though, a rating of I can work with it. I thought I would really like only having one tone knob to control the sound, but it is a little bit limiting for, all the different applications and tone chasing that I do. It does have really good Fender cleans, and it does have a really cool overdrive when it's crunchy. So again, it's somewhere between love it, but there's just something, again, I did it to myself. I didn't put enough controls in it. So it's like, it's just a notch below love it, and it's I can work with it. That's all the amps I can think of today. I think the kind of things that I look for, I don't like a lot in the circuit. I don't tend to like multiple channels. I tend to like, a really simple, straightforward circuit with some EQ control that's pretty versatile that I also can run through an attenuator. That's why these days I do everything with a head, an attenuator, and a cab. And I have a couple of different cabs and a couple of different heads. And between those differences, I can get a lot of different sounds. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. That costs you nothing and helps me out a lot. How my business works, Patreon, there's a lot of stuff up there, backing tracks, tabs, and all sorts of stuff. And I also make courses with the folks at TrueFire. You can check it all out on my website. As Bill and Ted would say, be excellent to each other. That includes yourself. See you next week.